All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, FCM community. I do apologize for the half-hour delay. Craig was being a dick as usual, so I had to invite Pawa, and we had to make sure that Pawa actually worked, and it did. So here we are. It is myself, it is Maddie, and it is Master PR out of New York coming on here to kind of give you a brief rundown. And by brief, I mean it'll probably be our normal lengthy spiel of the first round of this year's 2102 um, FCM first round. So we're going to go through all 30 picks as we always do. If we have time, we can talk about maybe some of the comp picks, and we'll definitely try to get into some of the picks we liked, at the very least, comp A round and beyond in this year's draft. This year's draft was an interesting one. I think that there was some relatively obviously choices there are in every year. I don't know. I think somebody at one point said that everything seemed to be going kind of as expected. There wasn't any really reaches or anything like that. I think I would tend to agree. I think everybody is, unfortunately, gotten pretty good at drafting. So there wasn't really anybody that would consider a reach or maybe even a poor pick as there has been in the past, as much so in the first round. But we'll get into that as we go. So we will start as we always do at pick number one. This pick was made and then traded an hour or two later. Why, I don't know, but it was. And this pick was 21-year-old right-handed shortstop Darian Foster, which who I believe in most people's minds was the consensus number one overall pick this year. Why I think that is he is a relatively good defensive shortstop with a lot of speed. He's the guy that most people tend to go after high in the draft rounds. Guys like Vinny Pope, uh, Cool from a couple of years ago, who was currently on the White Sox. And the list goes on and on of these speedy shortstops with the solid gloves that go um, usually top five picks. So a couple things that stand out about him. Again, it really is the speed of the defense, high health. Now he is 21. Already had his birthday, so he won't turn 21, 22 until the start of next season. Speed's pretty good. Decision making's a little low, I think, at 80. If I had to pick one thing that I wasn't thrilled about decision making being what it is, but his amateur numbers are quite good. So I think that I think they'll be a good player. Home run numbers too seem to be high for somebody, so he might have a little bit of pop on his bat too. So, Matty, what did you think about Foster?
Well, I think the power numbers are just because of 73 power in college. So I wouldn't read too much into that, but he's going to be a pretty good player. He's that build, that Cool, Pope, whatever else. We've seen that build come up many times. The kind of a shortstop to cut too. Of it. The one thing I would question is we've seen with Vinny Pope. I think we've seen it with someone else. I can't remember who it was, but these kind of builds, for whatever reason, tend to like, drop very, very quickly. Like Pope, he probably had like 1 or 2 years of a peak and then he bottomed out. So that would be the one thing to look at. And with Cool, I think he did just peak out. So what we've seen a couple years of him drop and be indication of these builds just die pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that is absolutely true on Pope. Pope out, dropped the next year, bumped back up the year after, and then the has kind of declining ever since then. The other one I think you might be thinking about was Paxton for the Yankees. I could be wrong on that.
Not him. He had that different build. Paxton had that build of the Mets had a shortstop just like him. They're different.
Paxton
they're not that
you're
super
right.
speed.
He did not have the speed. Okay, I see that now.
But yes, they both did die pretty quickly. So in that right, they are the same.
I remember Paxton dying off a lot quicker than expected. That's why I just assumed, but you're right, he does not have the speed. So, PR, what do you think about Foster?
I think Maddie hit the nail on the head with the one thing you want to look out for, and it is that drop. But other than that, I think you take this guy number one. You just really look around the league, and you look at what is most valuable, and you see a guy like this, 88 health for what that's worth. You definitely take the chance if you have a top pick like that. So yeah, I agreed with the pick. I thought it was one we would have made if we had number one.
Yeah, I think if you polled all 30 GMs, I think the majority of them take this guy number 1 overall. So, and the one that doesn't is probably just because they want to be a little bit different for everybody else. Next pick in the books is Zach Fitt, a left-handed pitching 20-year-old starting pitcher. Fitt, excuse me, is a very interesting guy. I think he's definitely a typical pitcher that I'd probably go after if you see him as the power pitcher, which he should be. But I mean, his vitals across the board for control, power, movement are the same. They're all 7.5, and that's the same as his overall. He stouts a 92 fastball and an 82 circle change. Again, at 20 years old, a very intriguing. Again, a left-hander, not something you see go this high in the draft usually, because as we talk about time, a lot of people seem to be down on left-handers, depending on the build, I guess, for whatever reason. But I really like this guy. He had a couple of years, and again, this is one of those things that always annoys me when I look at some guys, when I look at amateur stats, especially on pitchers. He had the Jekyll and Hyde home runs, 12, 8, 12, 6, 11, and whatever this year's going to be in the short time that he's going to spend probably in double or triple A. So it'll be very interesting. His strikeout to walkouts high, which is good. His OPA was either really good or okay. Again, all those other stats, those are the ones that kind of look at myself personally when I look at pitching. The home runs, again, if you want to do it out per innings, 11 home runs and 104 innings isn't terrible. I mean, you're looking at what? One every 9 every inning-ish. It's not too bad. A little bit over 9, I guess. But I don't know. I really personally, I love the pitcher. He's definitely a guy that I would take one of the top picks if I had it. But what is everybody else's thoughts on him?
For me, Fit. He's not the kind of pitcher I would like to take this high. It's not a bad pick. I think I think you would love him. I think he is certain the right park. Fit is a monster in. I think he's the one furthest along. If probably going to be the best, the most, or the fastest MLB ready guy. You could take that high. He's got everything in terms of specifics that you want in terms of his repertoire. That fastball is really fast, obviously. Stuff like that. The health isn't too high, so you have faith that might help the development. So not a bad pick. But I would have probably gone with another option right here. Not for the left-handedness, just to put that out there. I think more and more, at least the past few years, lefties have been going pretty high. Despite the fact that they're lefties, I think people are just looking at the vitals and noticing, hey, like just because this guy throws left-handed doesn't mean that he's not going to be a good pitcher. So not a bad pick at all here, but one that I wouldn't have made.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of interesting things about him. I don't really know what to truly make of him. He has that really balanced build right now. We know that eventually the movement is going to overtake everything. The homers, they're kind of high, they're low, they're high. What's he really going to be? The ground ball rate is low, so that could suggest higher home runs. The fact that he throws the faster fastball, that's norm for our pitchers. That I don't know what that could mean. Sometimes it doesn't mean that he's a long balls, but it could also mean he's going to be more of a strikeout pitcher. The repertoire is really interesting. I don't think we see guys with a 90-something pitch on draft day very often. That's something that off the bat he's going to have one elite pitch and another very, very good, probably elite pitch in his changeup. In the splitter, well, it's a thing. So I don't really know what to take him. I know in general I don't like pitchers who are more developed. It just seems that they don't develop as much, or just every year is so important for them to jump, and if they miss it or they don't hit a very good jump, that just throws everything off. But he'll definitely be a very interesting guy to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely a guy that I'll keep an eye on, just because again, those straight 75, 75, 75, something that I don't think I see often again. As Matty said, that somebody that this advanced, especially. So it'll be intriguing. The home runs are really what I think might make the man on this one. Boston with the third pick goes with maybe a surprise for some people. Zach Heck, 19-year-old, currently a relief pitcher. That goes second overall, and a guy that I really liked when I was scouting. There was two relief pitchers that really stood out this year, and Zach Heck was one of them. Now, the question that becomes here is 46 endurance. Does he leave him as a reliever, or does he flip him to a starter? I have said for years, and I stand by this, that I hate it when people pick relievers and then flip them to starters. I think that it ruins the relief pool. It makes a lot of issues for that. But as Dave is saying, in this case, I think if you're taking a guy this high, you're making him a starter. Again, I'm not saying that I advocate for that per se. In this special circumstance, yeah, if I had Hecht on my team, I would probably convert him to starter from reliever and go against my normal grain of doing the opposite for most players. And I would like to think that Fred taking him this high, that is his plan as well, to turn him into a starter, because a guy with a 60% ground ball rate, with the sinker being his primary pitch and his curve being his secondary pitch, and his fastball being kind of the third afterthought, more than likely would be a very good starter, kind of that typical control movement build that a lot of people like. So again, if I had to guess or insight into Fred's mind, he picked him this high because he plans on making him a really good starter. So we'll see if he does, and we'll see if that works. But overall, I really do like Hecht.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna
go ahead, Matty. Sorry.
If you're gonna take him this high, he's got to be a starter. There's no question about that. And I think, with him starting out with 46 endurance, again, that's a starter. Because for me, I don't like putting higher endurance guys in a bullpen role, because Mogul just messes with them. And again, also the fact of, like, if you're gonna make him your closer, you're gonna get like 50, 60 innings out of him. I'm gonna take the 200 innings every day. It's just simple. I mean, he's not going to give up very many homers with the sinker, the GB rate. That's another sign that it's just simple. Make him a starter, get a really good shortstop and second baseman. You have yourself a fantastic pitcher, starting pitcher.
I completely agree with everything that was said. I think I don't think it was very much a surprise, because I do know that we were considering Hecht in some way, shape, or form to take him this high. He's definitely going to be a starter. You hope that he turns into Tom Moy of Atlanta. I think that that's a decent comparison to what you're hoping for there. Not a bad pick at all. The only thing that scared us away from him, even if he got to us, was his power and how that would kind of react with his development. But other than that, pretty solid pick there as well.
All right. Well, so we all think he's going to be a starter. I think that in this case, like, he's where he was. Next pick off the board, and I apologize, picks up here. I know we're traded and moved around, so I can't remember if this remained the Mets pick or not. I believe it did. I believe the Mets technically had 2, 4, and then a whole shitload of other picks later, but I believe that was the way that it went. So, but pick number 4, again, I believe to the Mets, Ken Tyler. It was, okay, thank you. Ken Tyler, 19-year-old starting pitcher. But we'll start with you guys before I get into this. What do you guys think about Mr. Tyler?
You go first, Matty. Or if not, I'll go first. We like Tyler for sure. He has a nice ceiling. Obviously that GB percentage is pretty high. Nice 3-pitch repertoire. Mine high school stats are pretty decent. Had pretty moderate home run numbers. You like where his control is based on his movement. His health is that nice 69, everybody's favorite number, and the endurance at 72 makes for somebody hoping to have a pretty good time developing. 19-year-old rookie. His birthday is in October. I don't think that we've seen his true peak. I think he has a jump in him before that birthday, and if he does, he's definitely going to be a pretty nice pitcher for Decker.
Maddie might have dipped out again for a minute, so I'll go on now. Yeah, I tell you what, part of the problem I think I might have, and I'm just going to put this out front here. There was a couple pitchers that I definitely scouted, and a lot of pitchers I didn't. There was a lot of pitchers in this draft that I just wasn't interested in, or didn't think were going to make it to me. Obviously, I picked at the literal bottom end of the first round and beyond. So I wasn't. So a lot of pitchers that I knew were going to go in the top half, minus Fit and minus another guy that I'm going to really love on, or a couple other guys I'm really going to love on later in the round, were guys that I just weren't expecting to make it, so I didn't look into them a lot. When you look at Tyler, I could see why somebody wants him. He's that ground ball movement guy that everybody kind of wants. His stats show that he's not going to give up a ton of home runs. His strike to walkout ratio is not too bad. And again, those are the stats that I personally really look at. So I don't know. 60% ground ball rate, circle change, curve, fastball. Yeah, 19 I think is nothing that really says, oh, yeah, he turns 22 at the end of the year. But as PR said, if he does have a jump left in him, I mean, this could be a guy that ends up being a very good pitcher. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. We keep seeing these high ground ball rate guys go earlier and earlier, especially this kind of build where the controls about the movement, everything looks pretty solid. So we'll see. We'll see how that control steps up as things go on. Obviously, the movement's going to jump. How much does that control stay above that overall, or does the overall catch up and go ahead?
Yeah, that's the question. I think if the movement takes control a little too much, that's one question you do have about where he ends up.
Right. I mean, if he ends up in 90s with both, and that you're happy with it. But if he ends up one of those guys that stalls out in the low to mid 80s with control and movement, doesn't in the 90s, then it's a little bit of a different pitcher. So people typically don't like that pitcher as much. So Maddie's still here, and Maddie's going to give us his opinion on this gentleman.
I see the ground ball rate and the homers. You gotta like him a lot. I think the circle changeup. It seems like Mogul tries to kind of almost have that as like another sinker. So I think that's another hint that he's going to be a low homer guy. But you guys were talking about the build. Yeah, the movement's definitely going to overtake. And what he projects is anywhere from like mid to upper 80s control, mid-ish 70s power, and low 90s movement. I mean, that's a pretty good pitcher. He doesn't have a ton of upside from what you see from some other teeners. But the guy's I think he'll get there and be a very solid pitcher. The question of, will he be that number 2 guy, or will he just suck like a number 4 or 5 guy?
It only took us 4 picks, but we got to Andy's favorite thing to make fun of us about. And if that is the usual, if they're not an ace, there are 2 to 5 guys. So took us a couple picks, but we got there. Andy, you're welcome. I even marked for you on the chat. So, but yeah, moving on to the next pick. This is the 5th pick. This guy that you took, probably that went higher than maybe others. But he was one of those pitchers that I was commented about earlier that I was definitely scouting on my end of the draft, hoping that people just, didn't look as carefully as they always do. It's a silly little thing that I always hope for, and I'm always failed miserably at because everybody clearly looks as carefully as I do at all these guys. And that is Andy Turson. He is a 19-year-old right-hander. Again, 65% ground ball rate. He is a slider, sinker, cutter gentleman. Really high control, good movement, okay power. His home runs are, I want to call them non-existent. Strikeout to walkout ratio looks really good. This is a guy that I wanted to be all over in the draft. Really like this pitcher. I think that he was one of the better pitchers in the draft, personally. He's not as flashy as some of them, but all in all, I definitely thought he was one of the top 5, top 10 For me, I'm just going to flat out say, as far as starting pitchers go, he was definitely a top 5 starting pitcher in my books. Really like this guy. Hate to see him to go to a rival, just because that means that unless he gets traded, I'm going to have to face him a lot, and that's not something that I'm looking forward to. So, PR, this is your guy, so let's kick it over to you first.
Yeah, so Terracin was on the top of the list for both me and Double T, so it was a really easy pick for us. We knew obviously he had a mid 80s peak. It obviously seems like a very big reach for the top 5, but it was either him, Gable, or Monagia. Honestly, those are the 3 guys we were targeting at 5. And when we saw Turson, we really did not think Turson would get to us. I got to be honest, because when we first saw Turson, and me and TT were talking, we both said at the same time, like, this guy's Wiedmeyer. He's Wiedmeyer. You know what I mean? And Wiedmeyer ended up going, I think, pick 23 that year to you. Not or pick the 20th pick to you back in '98. And I remember seeing Wiedmeyer and hoping that he would fall a little bit further down to us. And when he went to you, I was kind of, obviously not happy that he went to you guys. So the minute that we saw this guy, and not only just see Wiedmeyer in him, but just if you look at them on draft day, we liked a little bit of what Terracin had even more. So we were confident in that pick. We were confident in passing up the other guys that we had in our list. Obviously, there's a bit of risk coming with it. The one thing that Wiedmeyer had that he doesn't is the age. Wiedmeyer was 17, he's 19, so we're wondering how that'll affect everything. But we had picked 23 when we traded Cologne, and that gave us a little bit of wiggle room. We just said, hey, let's pick the guy that we both said, initially our guts said, hey, this is that guy we went a couple of years ago. Let's make sure we got him. So
That makes a lot of sense. This was a guy that when I had pick 19, I was targeting him with that pick because I did not think he would make it through the 20s. Maddie, what is your take on Turlson? There's no L. I keep saying it. I want to put an L in there, and I apologize. I know there's no L in there.
Yeah, I think it's like Turrison. I think
Turrison. Yeah, that makes more sense.
So Turlson, yeah, I don't really like him all that much. Yeah. The numbers, I'm not really impressed because he is advanced, so they should be good. The fact that he throws an 82 mile an hour fastball, there's some kids in high school that never go on to even play college ball that throw faster than he does. And I do worry, but to the serious worry is that his control is far enough above his movement, and with his backside, I do worry if my projections are right and the control will be above that movement, which could spell either the home runs are not correct or the opponent batting average is not correct. He will get tagged for one or even both of those for a lot. But that control is there. The ground ball rate is excellent. Not a really honestly not a terrible guy to go after. I just do worry, only 15 true upside. How long does he have to develop? Which we'll know after Sim. What would that be? Sim 12.
Is that when his birthday is?
19th.
Yeah.
After Sim 12, we'll know how far. I mean, whatever drop that is, and okay, there you go. You should roughly.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair assessment. If Tristan doesn't kind of obviously jump the way we wanted to jump, it definitely could be a failed reach. But even at worst, we think we're getting a solid pitcher here.
Well, definitely. I mean, you think you take that guy 15 upside. Say if he only drops 3, okay, we got 5 years for him to develop. That's cool. But if come September he drops 5, well,
Yeah,
it's 3 years from developing. That's a problem.
Yeah, then this pick will turn into a bust in that case. But cross.
That's really my only really big concern with the build. With him, the build is okay, but I think when you look at the lack of ups, that 11 difference in control and move. Is it 11? I can't count. It's not. Whatever.
Yep, it's at the moment. It'll be interesting. There was there was a gentleman I want to compare him to potentially, but I don't think it's accurate. I'm going to double check real quick to see. No, I'd have to go back and look at this guy on draft day, but his ground ball rate's not as high, so it doesn't matter. So we'll see. We'll see. I really like the pick. Again, everything kind of comes out as things progress, so we'll see. Kansas City was next on the block. They took another starting pitcher. This is Nat Halsey, another pitcher that looks to be a ground ball type pitcher, even though his ground ball rate's only at 45%. He's got a controlled movement type build, decent power. Doesn't give up a lot of home runs, decent strikeout to walk ratio, pretty good amateur numbers. So he is a guy that, again, I did not scout this high in the draft. My concern with him would be if he is going to be a ground ball pitcher, he's going to get that 3.5 or 4%, whatever is necessary to get him into that high ground ball rate percentage. He needs to get there. I personally think, just because his main pitch is a curveball. His fastball's okay, and his changeup's pretty decent as well. Main pitch could be in a curveball. He seems that's usually the build you see with the ground ball type pitchers. And I just, by ground ball type, I mean that high ground ball type, not that mid 40s to upper 40s, like I'm talking about more. So it's going to be interesting to see where he is, how he progresses, how Matty's formula says he progresses. If it says that he's going to get mid 80s contact and low 90s movement, is that the kind of pitcher that you want to take this high? I mean, it's not going to be a bad pitcher, depending on how that looks, and as long as those home runs stay low. But was there better players on the board? I don't know. I'm not knocking the player. I know it kind of sounds like I am, but not a guy that I would have been rolling after if I had to pick this high. It was some other guys on the board that I thought I liked a little bit better. So, Maddie, what did you think about Halsey?
Honestly, my biggest knock on him is the health. It's a little an issue just because if you wonder, is he going to be that guy that consistently only makes like 25 starts per season? Other than that, I think he's a pretty good pitcher. The one big thing that I'm also going to guess that G Money noticed was that he only dropped 2 when he aged. So as a thing like with the previous pitcher taken, we know that Halsey is probably going to have a good amount of time to develop. You could say anywhere from 5 to 7. And the build is really solid. And yeah, he projects to have mid 80s control, mid 70s power, and low 90s. There's nothing that's really alarming in the stats. Yeah, his on-base average, opponent's batting average, is low because he has 74 movement, but I think he'll be a real solid pitcher. It's kind of a safe play, though.
Nothing wrong with safe.
Definitely a very G Money pick. I actually think that the health, within his endurance being at 85, the health, for whatever it helps with development, would have been better than him having like health in the 80s, just because of how far along he is. Definitely the peak drop is a good option there. I think that he's just going to turn into one of those pitchers that just picked him. It's going to be actually Halsey was on our radar, kind of not as much as the other players, but he has all the makings of a guy who's going to be a very quality pitcher, depending on how he develops. Of course, that goes with everybody. But I wouldn't have made this pick, but I understand the pick, and I definitely trust G Money's judgment of where he's going with his team.
Yeah, G Money definitely did a lot of trading to get all around this draft. So it'll be good to watch him work again with the team of his own now. It'll be very interesting to see. So next pick went to Minnesota. Minnesota selected a 19-year-old left-handed pitching Sean Gable. This is another guy with a high ground ball rate. Again, shocker. Minus the one guy without. Most of the pitchers we see going higher in this draft this year were ground ball pitchers. That being said, this is also an absolute crap year for power pitchers. I was very disappointed with the lack of power pitching options um, in the draft this year. Mr. Gable shows that high control, solid power, movement at overall, 82 health, fastball curve, slider. So two of those pitches above the fastball and the curve, slider a little bit behind. Again, he gave up a lot of home runs his last season in high school, which might not be a concern. Most of his other years were a little above average to below average, so it'll be interesting to see. Strikeout to walk ratio, for the most part, was getting better those last couple of years of high school as he aged. So the stats look okay. What kind of pitcher is he going to be? Again, he's going to be a ground ball pitcher. How good is he going to be? Is really what it comes down to. So I'm going to guess that Mass is hoping for a really good ground ball pitcher. I mean, he's definitely hoping for that guy that gets the upper 80s to maybe 90s control with a 90s plus movement, and he very well might get that guy. And if the guy even gets close to that 80s power, that's just going to add a little bit more to what he can do on the mound. I mean, all in all, other than the fact that most people might not like him because he's a lefty, he could be a pretty solid pitcher. On my end, I've had great success with left-handed pitchers. I have not had great success with round ball left-handed pitchers. So Maddie will definitely be able to correct me here and tell me if there have been good. No, there probably have been good ground ball left-handed pitchers. Just off the top of my head, I can't pull one out of there. So,
yeah, Brian Winwright. I think he's a pretty cool dude. But no, this guy, I think he has a really good build. I think really what I would look for. The control is the best one. The power is right there, and then the movement is far enough behind where you know that it has some time to grow. It will probably overtake the control, obviously the power at some point, but it'll be pretty close to peaking out. The ground ball rate is really cool. Yeah, the homers in his senior year are a bit concerning, but being that he's pretty young and only 54 movement, 54 overall, wouldn't be real worried about it. This should be another pretty good left-handed pitcher that a lot of people will be sad that they passed on.
we should also not say that as much, man, because then people are going to start taking left-handed pitchers, and I prefer them to end up in Seattle. So throwing that out there.
Totally agree. I think Gable's going to be pretty good. He looks a lot like O'Farrell, who we took pick 7 a couple years back. Gable was going to go 5 if Turrison did not make it to us. So that just says where we stood on him. He's got some, a lot of time to grow. Everything Matty said was spot on, and I think he's going to be a really good pitcher.
All right. Well, we'll move on and go back to the AL West, where Oakland picked next, and Oakland took left fielder, a 17-year-old Jim White, with the next pick. Now, personally, this is the kind of guy that I love to draft. I don't usually draft him this high because I've not been drafting this high in a while. But this is a guy that I absolutely love to draft. People are going to be, excuse me, poo-pooing him a little bit because he's a right-handed pitcher, but the same guy that took balls to the 20, somebody selects, and everybody gets called Aniston. I really like him right. I think he's going to get good contact. He's going to have good power. He's going to have an okay eye. I think he's just going to mash the. The question is, where is he going to play? Are you afraid to take a DH this high? I don't think he's a DH. I think he'll be a solid left fielder. Right fielder, no. Center fielder, God, no. Left fielder, yeah. He's more than good enough to play left field. And I think he's going to be a tremendous bat to have out there playing every day. 86 health is going to be what it is for some people, but I absolutely love to pick up Jim White. Again, I hate it when teams that are in my division pick well, because then I just know that I have to do something to keep up. So, but I really like this pick and I fully support Jim Wright going 8 Oakland.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's okay, but the power isn't as far above as the contact as what I'd like to see. And the eye is just mediocre all around. The defense, yeah, it'll be good enough to play. It won't be good enough to play in actual left field. I would play him in right field. And yeah, I don't care about the arm, nor does Mogul. But and my projections have him as a low 90s contact, high 80s power. I just don't know that that's going to play well enough as what you would hope. However, he is 17, so if he peaks out at 94, he'll be a damn good player, and even the good health will be a pretty good benefit because instead of being a guy playing like 145 to 150 games, he might be the guy that can play in 100 plus.
Totally think that if no matter if you have a hitter and stuff like that, you see a guy like this, and you think he's one of the better hitters in the draft, you can go ahead and take him even if you have a top 10 pick. And I think I don't think I would have necessarily taken him. I think there's a couple people down this list that went just right after him. I would have taken, but he's got the age, he has the high ceiling, and if he turns into that, anywhere near that 94 peak that he has, he's definitely going to be a middle of the order kind of guy. So I can see what Oakland was thinking here.
Yeah, and just like I complained earlier about lack of power pitchers in this draft, there was a lack of power hitters in this draft as well. I mean, there was only, I think, maybe 3 guys with decent to good power in this draft, hitting wise. I just it was a weird draft for me, to be honest. There's not a lot of power pitchers, not a lot of power hitters. Makes me hope next year the opposite's true. Then I can find a way to just get all around and up and in that first round draft. So we'll see. And I think more to what PR's point was, the next guy taken, I was a huge fan of, and that is another shortstop. This is Piero Masdu, who is just a phenomenal looking shortstop in my mind. If I wasn't able to get Foster without the first overall pick, I would not be getting him. This is the other shortstop that I would really want. He's got a decent glove. He's got decent range, decent fielding, decent arm. And he's got speed, a lot of speed. Very similar to what we saw out of Foster. Solid contact, a little bit of power, decent eye. Is he going to be the flashiest player out there? No, but he's going to be a darn good shortstop who should just put up very good numbers. I like him. He did have a birthday here, and so we have kind of seen his drop. It was 3 points, which isn't necessarily ideal. Everybody obviously wants to see the 1 or 2 point drops. So I don't think 3-point drops is going to kill him. And if he has to jump in them still, I mean, he could end up looking very good before the end of the year. So Piero, I was a really big fan of, and I'm glad to see him go to the NL. Not gonna lie, I love it when there's players I really like who end up in the NL, and especially not in the AL, and especially not in the AL West. But again, I'm selfish. So, what did PR think of this gentleman?
I definitely was on the top, one of the top of our lists in terms of middle infielders after Foster was gone. If he was there at 23, he was going to be gone, but we kind of knew he'd probably go before that. Overall, he's got good defense. He has the speed. The drop on his birthday gives you much more confidence about where his development is going. The health is decent, so if he can get even that, he's going to have some power. You see the two double-digit run years. He had the 3 going on there, but just overall OPS pretty high. Definitely a high-value guy. I would have taken if Turrison and Gable were gone. We might have went with him for sure.
Matty.
Yeah, he's good. You got the room. The defense will be good enough with the room. You think of Decker traded overall Darren Foster, and then you got this guy. That's not a bad guy. That's not a bad fallback option to have. He's gonna be a starting shortstop, and that's pretty much it. The whole 3-point drop thing. I mean, yeah, you would hope like that he only drops but 3 is not bad. You're still going to have a good 4 years for him to develop.
Yeah, that comes as definitely a dream scenario to trade the best shortstop in the draft, to pick who you think is the best pitcher, and then still end up with the second best shortstop in the draft. So, very interesting approach on his part. It seemed to work out. So, we'll see. We'll see how those two progress and who ends up ahead, and if they end up similar enough. Toronto with the 10th pick in this year's draft, they take Kieran Earnhardt, switch hitting left fielder, 17 years old. An interesting player. This is definitely a guy that I was eyeing up because I wasn't sure where he was going to fall in the draft. I didn't think he was going to go top 10. I thought maybe 10 to 20 would be the range for him, and maybe he would drop a little bit more, but wasn't expecting just because, again, switch hitter, young, and a high peak. These are guys that typically go quickly in the draft. But I wasn't sure how people think about that just because of the way that his build is. I mean, he definitely seems to be more of a heavy contact and light but average everything else kind of build. The kind of guy that gets to the 90s with contact, then flirts or just gets into the 80s with like power, speed, and eye. Like, very curious to see where he finds out. Finishes out, and the fact that his glove is not right. I mean, he doesn't look like he's going to be a center fielder. Could be a right fielder, could be a left fielder. I mean, he'll play fine in the outfield, but just nothing stands out above and beyond anything else, other than the fact that he has a 91 health and an 80 bunting. So I was very curious to see him go at 10 overall. Not going to pick. I think he's going to be a solid player. But again, this comes to one of those things. Were there better players, or is this guy going to surprise a lot of people? So, Maddie, what was your take on Earnhardt?
Well, I take a page out of the playbook of the good old Harry Doyle from Major League. And I think this guy could be a finalist for the Trojan Ends Boner of the Week award. I just, I think, talk about like what Andy would say. What does he do well? Okay, he doesn't get hurt. And then he doesn't get hurt. Oh, and he's a switch hitter. Oh, okay, that's really wonderful. He's very just okay, and he'll be very okay both sides of the plate. I guess I'm just not overly impressed with him just because of you got to do something. Hey, they have really good defense, run a bit, or hit for a little bit of power. Heck, even get on, even like draw a lot of walks, which doesn't look like he's going to do any of those things. He might be startable. That contact should shoot up there, but will it be enough to do anything when you can't do anything else?
I think it'd be interesting. I also, one other thing that Andy always says is, don't let me take all the switch hitters because I will kill you if you do. But again, I think your other point stands out more. What does he do well? And again, that's why I had a hard time placing where he was going to fall in this draft, just because nothing stands out as this is what I do. Huzzah.
Yeah, I would not have made this pick for reasons you guys have already stated. He has a high ceiling, so if he gets there, but I think his minor league stats show what kind of guy he's going to be. He's either going to be the guy that showed up the first 2 years, or he's going to be the guy that showed up the last 2 years, and that's really how it's going to go.
Yeah. And if it's the guy that showed up the last 2 years, then Corey will look back on our podcast and go, well, see, told you. So we will see. San Diego picks at 11. San Diego took Jason Weeks, 21, a 20, going to be 21 at the end of September year old. Right-hand throwing starting pitcher. This is another guy that I'm not sure how to take. 59-88. So 59 overall, 72 control, 67 power, 58 movement. So is he going to be a power pitcher? I'm not sure. Is he going to be a control pitcher? I don't like control pitchers that are high control, high movement, and a low ground ball rate. In my experience, they don't tend to end well. Um, so I'm very intrigued to see what this guy becomes. I know Matty will get on and project that he's going to have this, that, and the other, and they might look really good. They might sound really good. Will it be good? Will it be enough? What will it? How will it pitch? Like, I'm not sure. Is this guy a crappy pitcher? Is this guy Samuel Zwinga? I don't know. So he was a guy that when I was looking at the draft again, I didn't think he was going to make it to me, so I really wasn't worried about him. Had he made it down there, would I have taken him? With those 2 years of home run totals in college, I think I would have been very wary. If I was just looking at the high school numbers where he was getting up 7 home runs in every 70 to 80 innings, so about 1 every 10 innings, I wouldn't be too worried about it. The fact that as soon as he got to college, he gave up 18 in 92 and 17 in 103, those kind of things scare me a little bit. So I don't know. I'm intrigued by this player, but not sure if I like him or not. So, Pierre, what was your take on Weeks?
So Weeks is definitely a guy we were looking at for sure. I don't think I think 11 to 15 is a good range for him. I see he could have went top 10. The only thing I have against him is how far his movement is from his control. It's the only thing that kind of brings some question marks. But he's really young. He's got a lot of time to develop. He's got a lot of room. His health is in a decent place, and so is his endurance. He's got a home run problem a little bit. 18 home runs in 92 innings pitched, 17 the next year. So we want to watch out with that. Those stats might be a little bit inflated because of how young he is in college and how raw he is, but it's a good pick. And I would have made that pick around this area too. So, decent.
Matty.
I think, Mizzy, you hit the nail right on the head. I think he's the guy that's going to look really good, but just not produce. Those home runs, really concerning. If it was just his freshman year in college that were high, I wouldn't be all that worried, because pitchers sometimes, for whatever reason, they get to college, they can struggle. But the fact that he followed it up on the next year and didn't get very much better, no. And yeah, you see the low ground ball rate with a control guy. Those are red flags.
Well, Matty and I agree. So that either means he's going to be really good or we're going to be right. And,
God forbid.
God forbid either way. I completely agree. All right, so the next 2 picks both belong to Kansas City. Those were picks 12 and 13 in the first round. And for me, this became the couple picks where I started going, I don't get it. And that starts really with the first pick more than maybe the second pick, and that was the Simon Williams, the 20-year-old catcher. Now, again, he just had a birthday. He had a very small drop. It looks like he had a 1-point drop. That is really exciting why he was here. As far as catching goes, I don't get it. I don't think he's secure. I would not put him behind the plate. I wouldn't, unless all my other catchers were injured. And I said, well, shit, go for it. Like, maybe we're getting him because we expect him to be more of a first baseman. Maybe that is the thing that you're looking at. But I think there were better hitters in the draft. I'm not sure that he is going to be that good hitter. Again, you look at his amateur stats, and they're Jekyll and Hyde all over the place. You have a 690 ops, followed by a 1000, followed by a 660, followed by a 950. Like, it's all over the place. The home runs are the same way, up and down, up and down. He does seem to be more of a home run hitter than double hitter, so that is something. He is walking about as much as he's striking out. This last year, he actually walked more than he struck out. So I don't think I like him as a hitter. I definitely don't like him as a catcher. So I just am not sure why he was taken here or what the reasoning was for it. I don't know. I just don't like him. He might end up being a decent power I bet. I don't know. But he's not a guy that I would take this home.
Yeah, I wouldn't have taken him either. I know I said obviously I trust G Money's judgment, but this one was a little bit of a question mark, just because if you look at the bat and you look him being a righty and how far along he is to get, he should get to 70 contact maybe if he develops the right way, but if he doesn't, that's a little bit of troubling. And he only has really like he has 2 bad seasons, 2 good seasons, kind of flippy floppy in terms of his offensive production. He doesn't have an arm. He can't really field as well as a cat you'd want in a catcher. He's got a good ceiling. Maybe he develops the right way and he proves us all wrong. But I wouldn't have taken him either.
Yeah, me either. He can't play catcher. He's a first base or bust. Seeing how his number's going to flip flop, that leads me to believe that he's going to be that guy that, yeah, maybe he could run into a good season here and there, but probably more than going to be the guy who's not going to hit for very much of an average. His contact doesn't project something that where I would really feel comfortable. That sort of 1 point drop, I do question, was it a 1 point drop? I didn't really check back on him for the Sim 2 file to really know, but he already jumped.
It
might not
was
be a
a
true
1 point. It was a 1 point peak drop and a one point overall jump.
Okay, yeah, so he is just probably didn't do much. He developed either, would be my guess. So that could just be how his progression goes. Just not much and not real exciting. And yeah, he's got to reach 90 something power to be something, and I don't think he can get there.
All right, so none of us liked this pick, and we'll probably hear about it at some point, and that's fine. I was not a fan of the next pick either, and that was Paul Tyre, a 21-year-old left-handed hitting left fielder. Now he is a guy that I definitely looked into a lot, especially because I didn't expect him to go nearly this high. I thought he was a guy that would be available for me to take at the end of the round, or if not in the comp A selection, then at that point, do I want him? And he's a guy that I think most people are going to want because he's a left-handed bat. He's got some power. His contact isn't too, he's bad. I mean, again, could he play in the outfield? Sure. Most people going to play him out there? No, probably not. He tends to look a little bit more like a DH. He will turn 22 coming up here in August. So he has a drop upcoming. And I'm not sure if he jumped or not yet this year. I don't think that he did. So, I mean, that might be something that might be a little bit of a saving grace. He does, if you look at his career scouting, potentially have that upward stair climb. But he reminds me of a player that was taken a number of years ago, not that, like a decade ago. And I do apologize. I should have looked it up before this podcast, and I didn't. But he was looking at this on draft day, had a big drop, and then just died. Like, he just died. So the lack of eye scares me as well. So he clearly has power. His contact's going to be okay, but he doesn't have an eye. Does that mean he turns out to be the gentleman that Dave that I shot all over and ended up going on to a Hall of Fame career, Capitano? Maybe. But I just don't think so. He just, for whatever reason, I look at this guy and I just see bust. I don't know why. That is just the impression that I have on him. So even before the draft started, he was a guy that, even if he'd fallen to me where I was picking later in the draft, I was probably not going to take this guy because just something about him just scares me. And again, you look at his stats look good in the amateur numbers, but for whatever reason, I'm not thrilled by this guy. There's something's off about him, I think. But I could be wrong. Pierre, what do you think about McIntyre?
Um, I need my power hitters to have the ability to get on base at the very least. I need all my hitters to have the ability to get on base, but especially the power hitters. And he just doesn't have it. From what we can see from his lower stat numbers. I don't know where I would put him in the field if he developed the right way. He's 21, so with a lower ceiling than some of the other guys that were available there. Some of the other power hitters that were available there. Um, I don't think I would have taken him. The only thing I like about this guy is the fact that he hits lefty, and that his power is at 74, and he's a 66 overall. His splits are pretty decent, but I just don't see it. I mean, I have faith in G Money, man, but these last two picks, I don't know what's really going on.
Maddie.
Yeah, I like him. The power is pretty nice, and the lefty bat is nice. Yeah, it really definitely would be nice if he walked a bit more. The contact, it'll develop enough. He should be a guy who peaks out around as is mid 80s contact and high 80s power. You know, if you can beat the 80 peak or 87 peak, you'll obviously be better. But I also think the one thing you guys are missing on, he can play first base. So we now have corner outfielders having the ability to also play first base. And if the defensive chart is an actual true indication, 78 fielding at first base would be more than fine. Range sucks, but whatever. It's first base. Not get less about range space. So he can play first base. You know, play first. I mean, I see him walk a little more. Well,
But
if
I mean,
he
that's
would
the
shoot up a little.
yeah, that's the thing though. Is taking. I mean, if that's the case, there's a first baseman. There's a first baseman that was taken after this that I definitely would have taken over this one. And I think I mean, I think you would have too, honestly. So that's my only question.
Possibly, but I like the player. Maybe not necessarily him taking this early, but there's reason to like him.
True.
Well, we'll see when it comes up to 7-10. I think that'll be the deciding not the deciding point, but a deciding point. And we'll see here after we see that drop. So just like anybody else, obviously, without seeing the drop first, we could just guess. So we'll see. LA had the next pick. LA at 14 goes with Jeff Heller. Hellier.
Geoff Hellier, yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna still stick with Jeff. I'm pretty sure that's how you enunciate it.
I'm saying Geoff.
You could say whatever you want. It's a podcast. Nobody cares. I correctly enunciate names every draft cast. I really like this guy. I messaged Dan as soon as he picked him and said "fuck you." So I might have actually said "good pick," but I meant "fuck you," and I think he knew that. So I really like this guy. This is the relief pitcher that I wanted in this year's draft, knowing that I wouldn't get anywhere near him. I control, movement, power, good fastball, solid circle change, good slider. Just 17 years old, love him. Just absolutely love this guy. Love everything about him. He was the one relief pitcher. Like I said, I had to have, and knew I wasn't going to get. I think that he's going to be a very good closer. Flat out, I really like this pick. And wish Dan hadn't done it. So, Dave likes this pick a lot too. Sorry, Dan, he's gonna suck.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say that I apologize for the previous pick of not making it known from the get-go that I didn't like him at that spot. Just like I don't like Hellier. I like him. Could probably be a pretty good reliever. But still just a question taking a closer that you don't see being one of the elite guys this early. Controls there, power will be it'll at least be something if not complete. The ground ball rate is homers in a couple of years they're a little high, but you just have that 0 year. just 17. I think it'll be a pretty good overall, but I'm still just I don't know about taking a reliever this high. I just say screw it, make him a start, get a lot more value out.
Nah, I say keep him a reliever, and I think if if you look at previous drafts, if you have a reliever with at least his kind of makeup, how far along he is with his age, three pitch pitcher, stats are pretty decent. I don't mind the pick here at where are we 14? I don't mind taking this pick. If he develops the right way and gets along enough, he's a pretty prime time setup man, a closer, and for what it's worth, like we do have, you can find a decent reliever further along in the draft or in FA or through trade and stuff like that. But the really, really good ones are not as valuable as obviously the speed shortstops and the speed center fielders, but they're just as rare or almost as rare. And so, if you have a guy like this who hey, like he's got the age, he's got the makeup, he's got the ceiling. Just because there's an RP, I think you take it. I think you stockpile that kind of talent you could throw into the bullpen, and if he gets there and you get enough people like that, you have a strong bullpen to match with a rotation. You could become a pretty deadly team. So I see the logic in taking Hellier here.
Well, see, I'll just say this. I took Corey Olson in the late 5th round. I think Andy would probably say too, he's kind of killing taking relievers very late in the draft and having to do something. Another guy on my team, Jason Shinamias, he was taken in the late 3rd. I just think unless, you even said it, he could be a good setup man. If you're taking a setup man at 14 overall, I think you're doing it right. If you're taking a closer in the first, yeah, sure, go for it. But if they're not a top end closer, you can find relievers later.
And there were definitely some good relievers taken later. Actually, I believe Dan took another one later that I really liked as I'd say one of my favorite 5 relievers in this draft, and that includes the one that I'd actually make a starter and Hecht. I'm pretty sure that Dan took him later, and that might have been the one where I told Dan to fuck himself. So he's in the chat. He can tell me if I'm wrong, but it was one of them. I definitely told him to fuck off. So I'm not sure if it was this one or the next one, but we'll see. Next pick was Josh Cometer. Went to the Dodgers, a 17-year-old left-handed center fielder. This is the same kind of guy that we're looking at a little bit ago with a pick number 10 overall, and a kind of a little bit of a what does he do well. I think he'll be a defender. Not to necessarily home out, but I don't think he's going to cost any games. The bat seems to be a little bit all over the place. He definitely has some power. He definitely has some contact. So I think he ends up having good contact, solid power. The eye, I don't know where the eye is going to end up. Good enough, or is going to end up okay. So if I had to take a stab at it, he's going to get really good contact, solid power, and the eye is just not going to be where you want. It's not going to hit that 80 mark, which is at the very least kind of where you want to see. And the defense will be solid. So overall, at this part of the draft, 17-year-old left-hander with decent hitting vitals. Yeah, I'm not mad about this. I called you an ass, or well, apparently I called Dan an ass. I do apologize for misrepresenting what I told Dan to do. But I know that Dan and I were actually talking about this pick, the Dodgers pick. Dan wasn't a big fan of it. This is definitely a guy that I would. Is he the best player in the draft? No, but I think he's a useful piece that can end up being a solid player, very solid contributor for a major league team. So, Pierre, what do you think about him?
I think he's got the age. He's young. He peaks out anywhere near where his potential could be. He could be a very decent player. He doesn't walk as much as I would like, but he's still raw. He's still young. He still has time to develop. Defensively, I don't see him playing center field. So he's definitely gonna, have to range over to one of the corner outfield. He could play center field, but I don't think he's gonna play it as well as you'd want. But overall, he's a lefty. His splits are kind of drastic, but but he still should mash against righties well enough. So pretty good mid round pick. Pretty good ceiling there. Safe pick here, I think.
I think that's a fair assessment. Safe pick. I like it. Maddie.
He sucks. Who's next?
All right. Next pick in the draft is pick number 16. This went to Colorado, and this was Graham Emmerich. Graham Emmerich, a 17-year-old second baseman. This is another guy that I wasn't sure where he was going to fall in the draft. One of those guys that I secretly hoped would just slide, and then I would get to nab him. Not because he's necessarily going to be some stud find here in the mid-first round, but I liked him well enough. A little bit of speed, a little bit of defense, not enough speed, enough defense for what I really want to see. But I just have this feeling he's going to be one of those sneaky players that ends up pretty decent. Not Warren Hyde good, but a lot better than I think some people might expect. So I don't know why I think that, but I do. I like the cat. I was really hoping that, hoping against hope, honestly, that he would slide because I think he's going to have a little bit of speed, a little bit of power, a little bit of contact, just a little bit of everything. Is he going to be the best player we've ever seen? No, but he's going to be a guy that I think is going to be serviceable and a pretty good player to throw out there and use at second base. So, Matt, I'll go to you first because I think I know your opinion on this one. What did you think of Mr. Emmerich?
We lose him?
Possibly. PR, what do you think of him?
I think that I would have taken him over the center fielder that was just taken before this, and possibly over Hellier and McGinty and Williams. I think you hit the nail on the head with him being one of those sneaky players. He's got a pretty nice speed. He obviously plays second base. We don't know where his defense. Will it be decent? Will it be good? I think it has a chance to get somewhere in the high 70s to low 80s. Not really ideal what you want with second base. But if he develops pretty well, and he has a lot of time to do that, his stats scream volumes. He has really nice splits for a right-handed hitter. I think that this is the kind of safe pick yet risk you definitely take at this point in the draft. And I just so for some reason Colorado Camden tends to hit very well with these kind of players, and I think in Denver he'll be pretty good.
Manny.
Yeah, I like him. Was that what you're thinking that I was going to say?
No, I thought you were going to hate him.
Oh, yeah, well, I like him because he looks to me like a lot like George Evans. Give you a chance to look him up. Okay. Yeah, so you see a guy who has a pretty good profile offensively, some nice speed. Defense, it's okay. But I kind of think with the speed that'll help the defense out, he can stick at second base and make a healthy living there.
Yep, Evans is a good young player. Definitely has more speed than I think we're going to see in Emmerich. But I think it's probably an apt comparison. The only other guy I could think of, and I don't know if it would be a good comparison or not, I'm going to look him up real quick, as a gentleman that I used for quite a long bit of time. And that would have been, the guy I was thinking was Brandon Arnson, who's a much better defender with a little bit less speed. So probably not an apt comparison. We'll see what does. I remember seems like which means we're sorry, Cat. He is going to be terrible. So next up was GD. GD did exactly what I expected him to do, which was take the only pitcher that I really wanted in this draft, and that was Jose Calderon. A pitcher I thought for sure, based on two factors alone, was going to fall to me. A, he's already 22. B, he's clearly a fucking power pitcher. Two things that, outside of a couple other folks, GD being one of them, generally doesn't really look at. So the fact that he's 22, I thought for sure, especially with his 75-89 overall already, would make him drop a little bit. And I was getting tickled about it, even to the point that Dave and I talked about me trading up. And I was specifically trading up to take him because I was afraid he might go to somebody who just said, fuck it, let's take him. Trade him like in a couple of years in the mid-20s. So I was talking about trading up to get him because I like him. Yes, his home runs are atrocious. He had 18 last year in 127 innings, 11 the year before, and 13 the year before that. I didn't do the math on the 18, but the one on the 11 and on 13 actually isn't that bad overall. And he strikes out fucking everybody. His strikeout to walk ratio is awesome. I mean, the last guy I saw with the strikeouts that high compared to walks, I believe, or one of the last guys I saw, remember about at least, would be Jason McVane, a pitcher that was in Seattle for almost 200. Big fastball, hard curve, decent slider. Really like this guy. Is he going to be good? No, he might flash out and just be horrible. This is the kind of pitcher that I love to take and love to stake it on, just because I think he's going to be very good. I really like this pick. He was definitely my favorite pitcher that I was scouting in this draft. I'm not saying my favorite best pitcher in the draft. I'm saying for what I was expecting to see and where I was picking at. And even again, outside of maybe Charleston, I mean, this guy I really, really liked. So I was very sad, but not surprised to see G take him at where he did at pick number 17. TR, what was your think on him?
I think he's a very GD pitcher. Very much the kind of guy he likes. I actually brought up his name to TT about potentially taking him at 5. Just because I saw the same thing you were mentioning with the stats, with the strikeouts, just amazing. Very very good stats. He's got the fastball. He's got the the speed on that fastball. He's far enough along. He has 71 health to match with a 92 endurance. So I think that he could actually, it doesn't hinder his development as much as if he had mid 80s to 90s health. And he's already there. The control's already above 70. If the movement can kind of take control and the power can get along, you'll have a guy maybe 90 movement, 85 power-ish, and then like in the control in the mid to upper 70s. A pretty nice pitcher overall, especially if you have a pitcher's park. And because GD picked him, I think this guy's going to be a flat out stud.
He does tend to find those pitchers that most people don't like and end up turning them into something just phenomenal. So, Maddie, what'd you think?
I think he's horrible, but going to GD, it's one of those few situations where he can be one of those 4.00 ERA studs.
Yeah, well, I know the type you're talking about because those are the type that apparently I have nothing but. So, again, I really like the pick. I really like the player. But we'll see. Anything can change as time goes on, as we see just time and time again. Walking next to 18, and they took Jesse Culp, 21-20. God, I keep doing that. 20-year-old right-handed pitcher. Another one of the high ground ball rate, 65%. Really good curveball and a fastball and changeup that are okay. His control is well above everything else. Control 73. His movement's down at 59. Powers at 8, excuse me. Has the 1 year where he gave up 9 home runs in 54 innings, which is a little bit of a concern. Strikeout to walkout ratio is okay, nothing to really write home about. I don't know if this is another one of those guys that when I was scouting for pitchers, I was like, oh, okay, there he is. And I wasn't interested in taking him. I'm still not sure, even to where he went, I would be interested in taking him. I don't think he is my type of pitcher. I definitely had him highlighted on my sheet as somebody to potentially take, but it was not a guy I was excited to run out and grab. I think it's just one of those guys that ends up with control above everything else and with decent movement and no power. And typically, especially in my park, those kind of guys just flat out fail more often than not. So I generally, Rocky and I have similar taste in players. I just don't like this guy a lot. It might just be me, but he's not a guy that I was going to rush out to take. He was a guy, if he was there at a later pick, maybe I'd grab him, just hope for the best, or use him as trade bait. But not a guy that I'd be overly invested in.
Yeah, I don't think I would have picked him unless I saw him still there. After about pick 50 or 60 going into the third round. His control is just really far above everything else. Although, the movement could get there, things could get there for him if he develops right. That's obviously an if. Um, he had, I believe, a birthday drop. Um, I'm not totally sure. I believe he had a birthday drop. I'm not sure about that. But just in any event, the things he has going for him are his endurance and his health, potentially to help with his development. The health is at 64. So what kind of production is he going to give if he develops the right way? Obviously high GB percentage. I just don't know where he's going to go, and I don't necessarily think I would have taken him this high in the draft. I could see reaching for a guy, but not this guy.
Matty.
Yeah, so after the ground ball rate, the first two things I noticed are the health, which is actually a little bit of a concern of it being that low, and two, the endurance. It's not quite where it will tap out if you keep making him a starter. So the power and movement will get ever so slightly better. It's not gonna see any big jumps because his endurance is already at 66. But you'll get a slight boost there, so that kind of helps close the gap between that control and movement. And big thing about him that you really like is that when he aged, he only dropped 1
He
point.
dropped one. Yeah.
You're not going to see that every single year. So he has, that would be 18 upside. He's not going to develop until he's 38 years old. That's not going to. But he is going to develop for a long time. And I think this is a guy. If you look at him, if you saw him at 61.90, do you like him? If the answer is yes, you should have taken him probably long before this is one of those picks that this could really turn into a very, very good pitcher. It just really depends on how quickly he develops, because sometimes those guys that have those really small peak drops, they also take forever to develop to the point of where there's just not enough time for them to do anything for you. I know I've been a victim of that a handful of times.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed some of my guys that tend to peak later, 26, 27. And again, it depends on how they develop and how they peak. If they peak well, they're usable. If they don't, you've wasted more time than you would have with anybody else and get kind of pissy about it. So, but you see, not a guy I would take. I'm not a huge fan of him, but it's all personal preference. First time I said fuck today was with the next pick when Arizona took Jose Pole at 19-year-old right-handed shortstop at what are we at 19 overall. Yep, he was the guy that I had targeted since day one with my first pick at 30. And just kind of secretly hope, but wasn't actually expecting him to get there, and clearly he did not. He is a speed demon with a good glove, and he's 19, so he does turn 20 in September, so we'll see if he can jump drop, how that all goes. But I love this guy. Out of the shortstops, he was definitely third on my list, just because I think there was too far ahead of him, and then he kind of came in next. But I really liked him. I was really excited to draft him, and then Ren decided to shoot me down on that one. So, and again, after he went, a bunch of other guys that I had as my fallback or my next options all started going off the board too, which maybe go back to my original kind of two guys that I was looking at for my picks at 30 and 31. But I really like this guy. I think that Ren did very well to grab him in 19 before somebody else did. Matty, what did you think about him?
Love the Vroom. PR.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna take a chance with the lesser of the three shortstops that were up there. Use pick 20 on it. Go ahead, see what happens. If he develops the right way, pretty solid shortstop. If he doesn't, kind of fall short. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you throw a flyer up on him. He's not as much a sure thing as a Foster or Mazadil. I'll put it like that. But a decent pick, I guess.
No, yeah, shortstop this year you had 1A, then you had him. So when 101A go, and you are able to still get him, if you need this, if you want this, it's a pick that you make. So, like I said, I really like the player. Bruce Marshall goes next to the Giants, 19-year-old right fielder. He is a guy with speed that doesn't have speed, with an arm and some range and some bat. And I don't know what to make of this guy. He's an interesting guy. Comes from Rochester, New York. Obviously he went 20th overall. I really like his amateur stats. Obviously, he hit for a really high average. Hit just an amazing OPS every year. Not necessarily a power hitter. I mean, he might end up being more of that doubles guy with a handful of home runs, which isn't wrong. He's the type of guy that I've definitely made some money off of in the past. A guy that just to roll out there, hit you some doubles, a couple home runs. The way he projects, the way that I think he projects, as having that high 80s contact, and it probably ends up with low 80s power, speed, and eye, and then a decent glove to put out there in right field. So is he the best hitter you're going to be in your lineup? No. Is he going to you're going to put in the 2-hole and be absolutely thrilled with the production that he puts up there? I think so. So he's definitely a guy that is not maybe the best hitter in the draft, but I think he's definitely an exciting hitter that could really do well in that 2-hole spot. I would have drafted him, put him in right field, then put him right in that 2-hole spot and loved him there. So, PR, what'd you think about him?
I like the pick. I like the pick of where he got him at. I like his potential. There's a question of the fielding, but he has a good arm, decent range. He's going to have decent speed. I think if you're San Francisco and you're looking to add a future piece, a future ceiling piece, I think this is it. His minor stats scream volumes to the kind of guy he can be. So it just remains to be seen about how his offensive vitals develop. But yeah, I like the pick for sure.
I kind of think he sucks. Kind of projects as like a high 80s contact, low 80s power, low 80s eye. That speed, yeah, sure, the speed is pretty solid, but what does it really matter when you're probably going to be caught as much as you're successful? The defense, sure, it's okay for right field. Health, it's solid. But, I take a page from Doc Holliday. Nope, I'm sure of it. I hate him.
I'll accept it and applaud it. But we'll move on to the next pick. Next pick is 21 overall. This was Philadelphia taking Lance Todd, left-handed throwing 21-year-old pitcher. So he's the guy that I was eyeing up just because, again, lefty. Most people ignore lefties. And a guy that I thought at 21 might fall a little bit further. His stats are not ideal. His strikeout to walk ratio is pretty solid. He gave up a pretty more home runs this past year than he had in any year past, more than I would like to see. He put up 17 in 87 innings. You look at that too. In 87 innings, he made up 129 hits and walking 21 people. I mean, that's a 150 between walks and hits over 80. That's almost a 2 whip. I don't like to see that. If the stats that he's shown in the years before or were what you're going to get out of him, then I'm much more happy with it. And he was a guy that I would definitely draft and just hope that second year in college is more of an outlier than kind of anything that we've seen further. He's a guy that is, got some good control, got some decent power, got some okay movement. That 82 health is kind of what I want to see. Good fastball, solid slider, okay cutter. He's a guy I roll the dice on. He's a guy liked. He's a guy that I think could be a pretty solid, if not good, pitcher. If that last year of college is what kind of transpires and moves forward. So I think Dave made quite a good pick. He's picking these lefties I really like. Some of them turn out, some of them don't. But we'll see what happens here. Maddie, what did you think about the pick? PR, what did you think about the pick? There we go.
Well, yeah, I think he looks okay, but there's something about him that makes me feel a little uneasy. And then when you see those home runs, I'll just pass. Pass. But however, he only did drop 2 points when he aged. Maybe he'll be good. Just
there are concerns there, but I liked him. I would have loved to have drafted him. PR, what'd you think about him?
No, I think that for a controller movement guy, he's gonna allow too many hits and home runs. I think obviously he dropped 2 points. Maddie's right in saying with the birthday that gives you a positive sign. Him being 21, I think he still has a decent amount of time to develop, but I think you want that power to be way much better on a guy like this than it is there. And I think he's just going to fall victim to a lot of these right-handed mashers once he, reaches the majors.
And that's a valid point. He very well might. And if he does, I will gladly trade for him for pennies on the dollar and see if I can't fix him at Seattle. Because
Well, I don't know about pennies. Mid
nickels.
Missouri, yeah, he runs a tight ship over there.
That's true. So I guess dollars on the dollars. Oh well, I guess we won't see him over here. Not a thing. So, it did not matter. You're good. All right. Next was Detroit taking Brian Dudor. He is a starting pitcher in that very typical Detroit controlled movement, high ground ball rates. He's got a good fastball. He's got a good changeup. He's got a decent sinker. This is a guy that I'm surprised didn't go sooner, to be honest with you. All these guys taking ground ball pitchers. This is one of the few in this draft that I actually liked. His home runs are a little bit high the last couple of years. I wouldn't say them concerningly high by any stretch of the imagination, but they're a little bit higher. I like this guy quite a bit. I think GB, whether he put in a list with the draft, I don't know how GB drafted this year. I don't remember seeing him in the chat. But I was also too busy going, oh, God, there's another guy off my board. Oh, God, there's another guy off my board. To really pay that close attention. But I like him. I think that he could be a pretty solid, if not good pitcher. Now, I know Matty will point out that his upside is lower, and it is. He's definitely a guy that'll probably peak out sooner rather than later. So I think it's an idea of, how high that control movement make it before he peaks out. Does it make it into the mid to upper 80s? Does it make it into the low 90s? If it makes it into the low 90s, you've got a very good pitcher on your hands. If it doesn't quite get there, you still could have a good pitcher on your hand. It would be just a question of how good. So, Matty, what do you think about Dudor?
I think that you all are fucking stupid for allowing GD to get another very solid pitcher. Probably true that you wouldn't think that he's going to be great, but the very type of pitcher that GD just takes and knows that he has a very safe floor, and if that peak doesn't fall very much, he could have a very, very good ground ball rates there, pitches are there, control movement is there. Nothing that's amazing about them. So, at worst you have a number 5 pitcher. At best you have a number 2 pitcher, I think.
It's
PR, are you still there?
Maybe he's still thinking.
That's what it seems like, because it looks like his mic is on, but he's not actually saying anything. All right, well, while PR has his break, we will move on and come back to him once it is completed. The next pick in the draft, looking at 23rd overall, to Houston, Brian Managea. He is a third baseman with a typical power eye build. Looks to be just a monstrous hitter at 18, and his fielding looks to be meh. I don't know if it's going to be good. I don't know if it's going to be poor. I don't know if you're going to want to play him at third base or put him at first base. I would probably just throw him over to first base to be safe. And I am a bit concerned with the low contact on the right-handed bat, even at 18. You're looking at a guy that has a 57 contact versus 6 overall. Both his righty and lefty contacts are below his overall. So it's going to be a real big concern about how high those can get, and how good he will end up being. Personally, I think he'll be a solid, if not good, hitter. But again, I am a bit concerned about how high that contact gets. If it doesn't get high enough, he might be a guy that you have to use split. You only hit him against lefties, and if that's the case, that would be terrible. No, PR, we are still not hearing you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes. So why don't you talk about Dodor and then go on to your pick, third baseman?
Nah, Dudor. I don't know how far along he can actually to become good. So I wouldn't have taken him there, but GB's obviously done well before in the past. But moving on to Monagia, obviously he was a guy that we saw. We were actually potentially going to eye at pick 5. Just to we liked his minor league stats. Definitely a big time masher. Obviously a question of his contact versus righties, but when he fell to 23, we felt like he had enough of the upside. He might be he looks to be a decent defender at third base. He has pretty good health. So if he can peak out the right way, he is a lesser version of Hyde, I think. Hyde had better contact. Hoping that the contact can develop there. Splits aren't that horrible, that bad, even though they're 8 points away. So at worst, hoping to get a serviceable power guy, but at best, we could definitely hopefully see a 4 or 5 hitter who we can plug in at the third base spot.
Matty, what's your take?
Well, I'll say this. His defense at third base is actually pretty okay-ish. 83 arm, 74 range, 81 fielding. It's not bad there. You can play. It's not what you really want. But the big issue is that contact. It's really lagging behind. With that power being almost 20 more than his contact, eventually it's just lagged behind and just slow. I think Mike, San Francisco took a guy somewhat recently that pretty much the same thing. Like Mike was just all high on him, had the power and all that. He was going to develop great and fell short. Yeah, there he is, Tim Lynch. The guy, the power's there, the speed's there, the eye's there, but the contact is lagging behind. You have to wonder, will he consistently produce? I think that's where we'll see Managahia Hahaho. There'll be certainly some years where, hey, he'll hit like 225. And he can connect enough and hit 35 bombs. Yeah, that's great. But more often than not, he'll probably be like a 190 hitter, and it's not going to be enough.
It'll be interesting to see. I think the Lynch is a decent comparison, though Mahaga is a right hitter, and Lynch obviously is a left-handed hitter. But it'll be interesting to see because I think that I don't know. He was a guy that I agree with PR. He was a guy that the more he fell, the more I'm like, all right, like does he check all my boxes? No. Is he gonna be good? It is great value pick. If that's what you want to look at this range, absolutely. So had he continued to fall in that, I would have taken him, just flat out. Even though I know it'd be a little bit of a feast or famine type guy, I do like the offensive profile. Colorado picked next 24. They took a guy another guy that I liked, Nicholas Fortune, a guy that I thought, based on again another low contact guy, for sure was going to fall into the 30s, but did not. Start to get concerned around this because a lot of guys that I thought were going to go in that range started going earlier. Really shouldn't surprise me, but for whatever reason it did. Obviously, it looks like to be quite a good defender. 90 arm, 90 range, 73 fielding, 87 is a little bit higher than maybe I'd like to see. But you gotta like that bat. Even though he did do a little bit of Jekyll hiding in the minors, every other year he kind of hit below 200 somehow with a poor OPS. So it really depends on which guy you're getting. Are you getting that guy that hits 14 home runs with over 1100 OPS and a 3-something average? Are you going to get the guy that hits almost an 800 OPS with sub Mendoza line with a dozen bombs. At 20, and a guy that is not going to turn 21 until early next year, back in February. He's a guy I like. I like the defense. I like the bat. I like the fact that he's left-handed. I like the fact that he's relatively young. He was definitely a guy that I was high on looking at the draft. So we'll see. We'll see how he does. I think based on where he went, definitely the right place for him to go. Maddie, what do you think about Fortune?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the right place for him to go in Colorado.
Yep.
Because I think elsewhere he's going to struggle. He doesn't have a lot of upside, and the lack of contact would catch up with in about every other place other than Colorado or your other really high. But we'll see if he has some time to develop. Certainly a good pick, but as I see now, this is not a guy that I would the wagon.
Looking at Fortune, he was a guy we were actually looking at pick 23. He loved the defense. Him being left-handed, had confidence that the contact will get there. He's probably going to be a platoon, but he's a platoon that's definitely worth it there. He definitely could struggle if he wasn't in Colorado, but the fact that he's at Colorado, I think he's going to be a very good player for Camden.
Definitely a guy that raises his own stock just by being in Colorado. And then somebody gets excited to grab him. We'll see what happens when that happens. So, again, I like Fortune. Lefties tend to play well in Seattle as well, so I would have been very happy to put him out there. Definitely in a split format, just based on those numbers, but we'll see. Gene Keller, next off the board, 25 to Baltimore. He is an 18-year-old left-handed pitcher that looks to be relatively solid. He looks to be more of that power pitcher that I know I like to see. I know that Hokie GD like to see. His home runs didn't seem to be too much of a problem. 7 and 56 innings isn't the best, isn't the worst. Good strikeout to walk ratio. He was definitely a guy that was on my board. A guy that I wasn't sure where he was going to go. I think I had a lot of that in this draft. There was guys that were higher peaks that I thought weren't great, might drop. There were guys lower peak that I thought were pretty good, might go early or might stick around where they would normally go. So I'll be interested to see how he turns out. Does he get more power? Does he end up being more of a movement guy? How does that work out? If he ends up being one of those guys that seems to go in order, control, power, movement, I mean, I've started to really like some of those builds, especially in the lefty. They can play pretty well. So it'll just be really a matter of where he finalizes out. But 18, a lot of time to grow. I think Keller could be quite a good little pitcher.
Yeah, Keller was one of the options there that we were going to take besides Montague and Fortune. It was Montague, Fortune, and Keller was really the three guys on our list. I think he's going to be a flat-out stud. I think, obviously, if things go left, he doesn't develop well, could be problems, but he checks all the boxes, really, that you would want from the power pitcher, especially a lefty. He doesn't have a big home run issue. He lets up quite a bit amount of hits, but you expect that for a 17-year-old in high school at 57 overall. So he only dropped 3 points for his birthday. So definitely a really good pick here at this spot for High Heat.
What do you have on him?
I'll say this. High Heat does well when he drafts guys who are named Gene. So, there's a little history with that. He has a really nice opening to build. Power is above. Control is always interesting, especially when too far above it. The movement will get there. Home runs, there's nothing that's overly worrisome. He did only drop 2 points on age, so lots of time for him to develop. He has a pretty nice repertoire. And again, I'll go back to the first name Gene, High Heat. It's a match made in heaven. I'll say somehow he'll be a Hall of Famer.
That would be nice. for Baltimore, not necessarily for the rest of us in the AL, but time will tell. So that was Gene Keller. Next on the block is Texas with Chris Cardone. Chris Cardone, 19-year-old left-handed pitcher. This is another one that I was not sure about personally. 65% ground ball rate, sinker is primary pitch. His control is above everything else. Doesn't have any power. He's not going to be a power guy. He's clearly going to be a controlled movement guy. Movement's one below, health 81. Things look pretty well. Strike to walkout look okay, not great. Home runs aren't going to be an issue. But this was a guy that I looked at a whole bunch of times because he was a guy that I thought for sure was going to be in my range. And I couldn't come to a consensus whether I liked him or not. I think he's a guy that's going to be an okay pitcher. But he is a guy that I think will be a back end of the rotation pitcher. Not a guy that you have to have, but a guy that you don't mind having to kind of fill in a spot. Kind of almost like an eating hitter per se. So, for whatever reason, did not get super high on him. He was a guy that, even as my pick was coming up, he was not a guy that was in contention at 30 and 31.
Well, he's another sinker baller with a nice ground ball rate. Yep, nice ground ball rate, real nice ground ball rate. The control will obviously be pretty good. So I'll just say it. This would be another guy that Warfreeze develops into a really, really darn good pitcher. And for whatever reason, trades him off.
I definitely agree with you, Mizzy, where I don't know where to place him. I look at his minor stats. I see he had a season where he almost had 7 ERA, and that turns me off a lot. I don't know where his power is going to end up. Him being a lefty and allowing a lot of hits also is a concern. I could see him going early, mid-second round. I see you make the case there, but I think there were some other guys there were a lot of other guys that went literally right after these picks in the first round and real early second round that I would have taken over him.
All right, next up on the board, excuse me, is Colorado taking Jose Fremo. Again, another ground ball type pitcher, 50% ground ball, right control movement. He's got a fastball and then a circle change. Currently set as a middle reliever with a lower 77 health. And again, this is another one of those guys that I had, as a guy to keep an eye on, but wasn't really sure about. I think I'd like him a little bit more than the last pick, just because I think that he ends up being one of those just really big guys with decent control, but not much power, which, again, not ideal for what I like, but not a bad pitcher. I think this is another guy that you plug into your rotation and you're happy to have, but not a guy that you're like going out and trying to trade for with all your might. I think I like his amateur stats a lot better than the last guy as well. The worst year of home runs was that last year where he had 11 and 55. And don't get me wrong, there was also an 8 and 40. So, he's averaging home runs a little bit more than I would like to see in my pitchers, about one home run every 5, one to every 7-ish innings. It's a little bit higher than I want to see, but I still like him better than the last guy. I don't think he's going to be a terrible pitcher. Maddie, what'd you think about him?
The higher home runs are enough just to turn me right off. The lack of power build, sometimes the home runs can creep up on those guys too. Just like the can of power builds. He hits up a little bit of a saving grace. The fact that he only has 53 endurance, so the power and movement will both increase as he increases his endurance into the low 70s. But yeah, not much upside. The home run issue, I'll pass on that grass.
Yeah, I gotta agree with the upside portion of that. It's just not what I'm looking for, even in the late first. I know I've taken some guys like Phil Denman and Kettler, some of those lower mid to low 80s peak guys in the late first, but they were in the 50s overall. They had a lot more room. They were a lot younger than this. I also don't. I mean, I know I sound like a broken record, but I don't like where his power is. Like, if he's a control and movement guy, he's definitely allowing too many hits and home runs for me to care to take him. He's also one thing I did catch on, and that old wise man actually mentioned a few pods ago, is these two pitchers. Kind of looking at them and watching how they develop. Some of them they'll develop that third or fourth pitch and they'll get there, but it's just something to watch about how far along and how advanced the guy is. I don't think I like where his endurance is there, so I would have passed on Fermio. I think the guy that went right after him would have been a better pick, and could have potentially went early 20s. Uh,
And that would be Edgar
Ed-
Dominguez to Milwaukee, a 19-year-old left-handed right fielder. And this is a guy that I had on my board as a potential sleeper pick. He is a guy that, again, when you look at him, he's just defensively, he is very good. A little bit of speed, a little bit of contact, a little bit of eye, a little bit of power. It's a little bit of a bunch of different things. And by power, I mean he's kind of going to have those double hits. But he is definitely a guy that I was looking at heavily with my picks, because I just, the more I looked at him, the more I kind of started to like him. A guy that I think gets into the probably upper 80s with contact, probably 80 speed, 80 with eye, like the low 80s speed, low 80s eye, and then just be a good defender as well. Is he going to be a guy that, again, you're trading a draft class plus to get? No. But is he a guy that you're going to want to have on your team because you want to plug him in to the 2-hole or the 7-hole and just get on base and do things? Yeah. And again, is he going to get on base as much as you want? Maybe not as much as some people want. But he's definitely a guy that I think is going to be better than a lot of people expected.
Yeah, I say he's a guy that I want to like and I hate. I like the whole defense and contact stuff. Kind of like that. But I hate him for the fact of it doesn't look like he's going to walk a ton, and those low Ks can kind of detract from the contact of how it's actually going to play, and you kind of see that with his amateur numbers. How we've seen some other guys with lesser contact have much better batting average, and I just really worry if he's going to be that guy that just you think you're going to get some 310 hitter and he ends up hitting 270. And he'll be a decent player, definitely, but I would just be concerned if he's gonna be what you really think with contact.
I definitely have to agree with his low Ks and very low walk numbers being a concern, especially since he didn't necessarily flip flop, but he had a not too good first year and a not too good last year with some good years in the middle. And I don't know, you can take what you want for what that means. He has good defense. He has a good range. I think he's a better pick than some of the other picks ahead there. I think at least in this day and age, with the way we're valuing guys like this, he could have went a little higher. There were picks after him that I would have actually picked too, but I think around this area, you take a guy like that, hoping he turns into a very valuable hitter and defender.
Yeah, again, I was definitely considering with my 3 picks that were upcoming here, but I didn't have to make that decision. So next, 29 overall was Dan Rotnia, 17-year-old left-handed pitcher that looks to be more of the power pitching build that some of us know and love. Strike to walkout ratio is not good. He tends to walk more than he strikes out. Home runs seem to be okay, not ideal, but okay. So it's really just a question of how is he going to develop? What is he going to look like when all is said and done? he was the guy that I actually did not even put on my draft board. Partially because I thought somebody would probably just take a flyer on him before he got anywhere near me, and partially just because I worry that control is not going to get good enough. If it could get into even the low 80s, you could look at a very good pitcher in hand. A guy that gets in the low 80s, the control ends up in the mid 80s in power and somewhere in the 90s or upper 90s in movement. Like, yeah, that's the pitcher most people are going to like to want. But I'm just not sure if he gets there, even at 17, even with his upside. It's just there was enough there that I probably wasn't going to take him. Even if he hadn't gone to this pick, I probably would have let him go myself. So, not a bad pitcher. I think there's a lot of potential. I just don't know if that potential will be real or
not. I think at pick 29, with how far along he is, you take a flyer. Maybe see where I've seen Eric pick guys like this. And they fucking turn into some pretty decent players. So if you're gonna take him, the end of the first, beginning of the second, it's a decent place to take him. So I don't like him. I don't necessarily think he will be a great pitcher, but if he turns into something, this was the right spot to take him.
At first, I really didn't like him, but the more I kind of looked at him and kind of thought of what these pitches turn into, I like him. Now, my profile, my scouting file has him at low 70s control, mid to upper 80s power, mid 90s movement. The one thing I know that with my profile is sometimes I can overestimate movement, especially with guys that are pretty young like him and that have builds like. So I would think it'll turn some of that movement to better control. And I would just say, I don't know. I didn't look back on it, but I would think some similarities between him and the old Kevin Lester, the guy who I remember I shit on the draft review because it looked like, well, surprise, surprise, that control got at least good enough. And with that power and movement, pretty darn good pitcher. That's what Rian took.
Well, and we'll see how this all turns out. Now, the last pick in the first round is the Seattle Mariners taking first baseman, 20-year-old Todd Bryan. Todd Bryan going to the Seattle Mariners at pick 30. This was my pick. This was a guy that I had pegged at this range, and he was still there, so I took him. I liked him. That's why I took him. I liked the power eye combination. I like his amateur stats. I like the fact that he's 20 and doesn't turn 21 until the end of the year. So, again, at this point of the draft, I'm taking this guy every time. I'll take those power bats, even if they end up just as DHs. So, is the control a little bit lower than I want to see? Oh, sure. It's a little bit lower than I want to see. But first righties, it's already at 61. So the chance of it hitting 70, I think, is, I don't want to say a sure thing, but I'd say high. There's a high chance it'll hit 70. So if it does, then quite happy with this guy. And it's a guy that could easily get into the 90s with power and eye and just be a masher. But the only other concern I would have is the eye's very high already. So I don't know. Sometimes those guys that already have really high eyes on draft day could be issues. But again, I made the pick. I like the pick. I'll stand by the pick.
I think Bryan has a chance to be the best hitter taken in the first round and even in the draft. I think he's a DH. Obviously, he can play first base. He's primarily a DH. But he's got those power numbers. The OPS numbers are there. He walks a ton. He's 20 years old. Obviously, the power's there. Contact should get there versus righties. You might need a platoon, but that's just fine. I think versus righties, this guy might be the best hitter taken. Has a chance to at least. Definitely a guy that we were eyeing even higher around 23. So and I mean, just to put it out there, I know we're not covering much of the second, but charters, you taking charters just really fucking got me angry. We were really looking at charters at 39. And this back to back was a really good back to back. I think you and G Money had probably the best two drafts today. So kudos to you, and I think Brian's going to be good.
Well, I
My eye
appreciate
guys really suck. Just in general, Mogul doesn't seem to want to develop those guys the way that you would want, and or they just don't produce like you'd want. You could look for even like the development of Luke Vineyard with the Angels, or a guy on Toronto by the name of Jeff Harvin. Harvin looked like he should be a really good player, but overall, just nothing that's really. That's where Mogul does with these really extreme high odds. Tend to do much of anything, and I would worry a little bit about the con because he doesn't have upside. But of course, if he beats that peak, his contact will be fine. The power will be good. What would the eye do to the vital? Downplay those, or we'll let them play up?
Yeah, that's definitely some of the same concerns that I had. But again, this part of the draft, I wasn't going to let this guy go. And as PR already said, Charter's another guy that I thought for sure people were going to take in the mid to late round. Just how people get all ornery about guys that look like this. Now, mind you, his speed is not the best speed. There was plenty of guys in the draft taken before and after that had better actual speed stats. But for a guy that's 21, won't turn 22 till next year, his layout, I liked it. I definitely will take this guy time and time again in this range. So, as Pierre said, we're not going to go through every pick in the second round. First of all, because it's late. Second of all, because I hope to God nobody cares that much. But I mean, as far as second round picks go, obviously, yes, I liked Carter's quite a bit, so I took him. I also like the catcher that I took, Suarzo, 17-year-old that just looks pretty darn good. Again, as many will say, he has a little bit of a higher eye, so we'll see how that goes. LA did take the other.
He can't throw the ball.
Well, no, he is not a guy that I am taking because he has the best arm. I'm taking a guy because he has the best fielding, the best handling that I've seen in a while for a catcher. So is he the typical catcher that most people take? No. But he prevents steals at 81 and handles pitchers at 93 at 17. I'll take that, and I'll be happy with it. LA took Alan Witherden, a relief pitcher that I was really high on. Took him in the mid-second. I thought that was a pretty good pick. Again, very briefly moving on through some of these other picks. Washington took Kevin Doan at the end of the second. A guy that is an interesting guy. Again, had a guy with pretty good speed, minus bad decision making. Could end up being a pretty solid shortstop, if not a good shortstop. Somewhere on the long lines. Pitt took Jeff Fales in the third. Another guy with a horrible contact, but pretty decent speed. Ended up being an okay second baseman. There was a outfielder, Snyder, that went, I believe, in the third or fourth, that I was also a fan of. I believe I was even one of the guys I was trying to trade up at one point to get. So
yeah, we ended up taking him.
Did you guys? Yeah.
I think honestly I gotta go out on a whim and say Joey White taken by Peter 69th overall is a pretty solid pick. And GB taking Chadwick. I think Chadwick as well as Mark Joplin with the 40th overall pick for G Money. I thought those were three standout pitchers, three standout players taken in those later rounds.
Yes, I would agree with those. Matty, is anybody you noticed late in the draft or in those mid rounds that you liked?
Mid rounds, you already kind of touched on Snyder. I'll just touch on a little bit of. I like him, then I don't. If I was going to actually have to grade him out, it'd be a solid 3-star grade. It's right around where he should have went because he dropped from a 93 to an 87. So in how Mogul takes those guys down plus, it's anywhere from a 6 to a 7 point drop. Probably not a lot of time to develop, and it's a risk. If he jumps, have a really darn good hitter. If he doesn't, have a guy that you're just looking to sell off for a couple million once he peaks out. Joplin's already hit on. I liked him. Another pitcher that the Astros took, Castoro. I liked him. Thought this could be a good one. The build, again, him with the power being a little bit above the goal. Just with the upside. Really liking. We'll get to see here in 2 sim. He drops. That'll be wild, crazy excitement. With the real late rounds, the Red Sox got first baseman Maury, 107. Is that 107?
Yes, 107.
Yeah. Yep. So that was a 4th round pick. I think that's the guy. That's the guy that I was kind of looking at. My pick, if he fell to him, definitely just because of a lefty bat, it's decent power, an eye that's okay enough, considering not a low strikeout guy. The last one that I love, hint, was Roger. Like the build, nice control. Like the fact that, of course, again, he didn't drop very much. Good ground ball percentage. That's the type of guys that you should be taking in the. There's obviously some things that you think, oh, he might not be good because that control is above the movement. But that late in the draft, you have some time to develop. Take those guys, see what happens. Maybe you get your own little Corey Olsen. Maybe you get a guy who's useful in Alan Ashling. You get something.
I'm sorry, who was that, Matty, you just said?
Alan Ashling?
No, the player that was drafted.
Oh, Love.
Love, okay, yeah.
Love.
The last player that
I
went at 150, Chris Heilman, 19-year-old left-handed reliever, 34 endurance, 60% ground ball rate. This was a guy that I should have drafted, and then he kept slipping. I'm like, he'll make it to my next pick, and he did not. But Montreal got him via a list, I do believe. I don't think Gilly was at the draft, so he went about 11 picks before my next one. I probably should have taken him with my pick before. I almost did, and might end up kicking myself. I think he's going to end up being a pretty decent reliever, one of those late inning guys or late draft guys that Matty was talking about earlier. I instead took a starting pitcher that'll probably end up being trash. So we'll see what happens. But again, another good year for the draft. Was the draft the prettiest draft we've ever seen? No. Was the ugliest? Far from it. Just like every draft and every draft podcast, there's guys that we like, there's guys that we don't like. But we'll continue to talk about it. I mean, you'll continue to listen because that's just the way it works. So, PR, Matty, do you guys have anything else for the good of the order?
Thanks for having me, as always, man.
Nope. Glad it'll get, it works good and we can get 3 people on and just kind of bounce things back and forth between us. Matty, got anything for us?
No, not really. I mean, it was a draft. Probably not as good as we hoped for.
That it was.
What Andy kind of talked up a little bit, but I don't think it was as bad as last year's. So there's that.
I definitely think it was better than last year's, but it was a draft early on. I was excited. I got a whole bunch of picks and then I traded most of those picks out for younger players instead. And I'm kind of glad that that's the route I went. I got a couple players that I liked, a couple players that I wanted, and a bunch of stuff I probably don't need. So, but
yeah, lots of movement, lots of draft trading movement on draft day, more than I had seen normally. So that was good, at least for the second and first round.
It's there was a one draft a couple years back. There was literally almost every other pick seemed to be a trade. So it wasn't quite that exciting, but I was actually home and able to draft from my office, which was nice. Because I doubt that's going to happen next draft round. So who knows? I'll have to try to plan out my schedule accordingly because I'm hoping to have picks next time too. So, all right. But again, from all of us to all of you, I hope you enjoyed this. And anything that we messed up, as always, Jermaine will fix and posts. So good night.